Today's session is on service reviews and evaluations and best practice around both of them. And I'm delighted to say that we're joined today by Rachel Walker. Some of you may know Rachel. Rachel, would you like to start by introducing yourself, please, and start by sharing your screen?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, thank you, Michael. Yes, coming to you live from a hotel room in Chelmsford today, hence the sort of formal looking door behind me. So thanks, Michael. Yeah, we're going to be doing a short change chat this morning of 45 minutes, and we're going to look at service reviews and evaluations. And I'm going to go through those in a minute. But yeah, I'm Rachel Walker, and I work with Trim and Change on a number of things. So when Michael and I run a lot of service reviews and evaluations. We know that with local government reorganisation coming up and with a lot of sort of grant funding around things like UK SPF funding, Plan for Neighbourhoods funding coming out, service reviews and evaluations are sometimes seen as necessary evils, but actually we think they're great opportunities. So I am going to share my screen and I'm going to talk through a handful of slides in terms of best practice we could all improve on, and sort of why and how we structure the work that we do. So I was going to talk about service reviews first, and then I'm going to go on to evaluations. Now, for some people, service reviews and evaluations are the same thing. They're not. And I want us all to think sort of they're in the same family, but they're cousins, not sisters. They're very similar in terms of how we approach them, what we want to get out of them, but they are two quite distinct different things. Now, with local government reorganisation coming up, we're going to be hearing a lot more about service reviews. Up until recently, or up until LGR, we do service reviews when we want to cut our budgets. That's probably the biggest reason that we do service reviews. But things like new legislation around statutory services, so planning, for example, new statutory services or new obligations can sometimes prompt a service review. An end of a contract for our waste services outsourcing or whoever provides our bin wagons, that kind of thing. Sometimes that can prompt a service review. Merging or sharing services, that's done quite commonly in revenues and benefits, sometimes prompts a service review. Now, service reviews at the moment, there we go. I've gone too early with my slides. I thought I had. That's why I've got the bins up here. So local government reorganisation right now is the trigger for a lot of service reviews coming up. So LGR is going to demand, now not all at once, and not, there is a priority list for this, particularly for district services. But local government reorganisation is going to demand a full spectrum of service reviews. Now, that is from bins to benefits. So the way in which we all collect the bins seems particularly straightforward, makes perfect sense to us all. But I'll share a story with you. Once upon a time, about 15 years ago, I was part of a shared services partnership across a very large county council. It's a two-tier area about to go through local government reorganisation with about 12 districts. And the whole program was designed to share software, to share an app for members of the public, and to share similar systems so that everyone was doing things the same. And it was all around picking up the bins. That shared services partnership collapsed because no two councils within this county could agree on how to pick up the bins. So millions of pounds kind of went down the drain. It was siphoned off onto something else, and the partnerships that had to transition and pivot into a different kind of objective because nobody could agree on how to pick up the bins. Now, that is, council bashing on Facebook has become a national pastime, and we all know that the bins come in for a lot of criticism. But when we get down to services like this, it's seemingly easy from the public's point of view to deliver. It's the very basics of it. It's a very visible service about what we're delivering. However, we know that when it comes to service reviews, something as seemingly innocent as picking up the bins can prompt an awful lot of administration. It can prompt an awful lot of sort of route management, GIS mapping, diesel and fuel mapping, and all of these things. It's a lot more complex than it looks. But in a service review, which is what we're going to come up against now with local government reorganisation. So we've got 3 or 4 councils merging together. From day one, they may well stick with 4 different ways of picking up the bins. You've got service contracts that need to expire. You've got, really intense route mapping that's already taken place. But at some point, all those four will need to merge into one waste and refuse service. And that is, again, on paper sounds really easy. We'll pick up the bins in one particular way, but this is going to be an enormous source of tension. It's going to be a lot of gatekeeping or sort of pride in the services that we've delivered so far, quite rightly. And, we're going to come across a lot of differing opinions, residents with different needs, leaders and politicians with different needs. So let's get ourselves into the mindset of why now. We've got a massive change coming up through LGR. Now, LGR is kind of about saving money, but a good service review or the service reviews right now is not about saving money necessarily. It's about reshaping delivery for new governance models, for new residents, for new teams. You're going to have new hierarchy. You're going to have probably new contracts with, you know, bin providers or planning portal providers, that kind of thing. So have a think. We need to start really genuinely with a bit of haste here thinking about which services from day one or from early doors needs to be delivered as one service and which services can continue as three or four for now, but eventually will need reshaping. So service reviews, when we do them well, can really surface what works, what's broken, and what needs redesign at scale. So I'm going to stick kind of throughout this with the bins, if you will, because we all know what that means. Now, done well, a good service review can accelerate your new teams, your new culture, your new services, your new brand and identity for residents, your new council. Done poorly, we can see, we're going to be looking at years of issues. So service reviews now are going to be essential for these really big, really visible essential services. So when we want residents to get into the mindset of one new council, it's what do the bin wagons look like? It's what does the calendar, what does the website look like? How are the bins being picked up? Which bins do we have? Michael and I live in neighbouring local authorities. Our bin services and recycling services could not be more different. However, our two boroughs are likely to be part of one council in the next 2 years, and that this needs sorting out. So moving on to what a good service review looks like. Now, at Truman Change, when we talk about sort of services and change in particular, we focus a lot on purpose because purpose is really crucial to good change management. Understanding the vision and doing something for a purpose will galvanize people in terms of getting them on board with the change. It gives you very clear communications lines to deliver. Now, what I want to say, if you take away anything from this webinar today, is LGR gives you the trigger and the excuse. It doesn't give you the purpose. If you lead your service reviews with LGR is making us do this, listen, team, I don't like this any more than you do, but we've got to do this because we're all merging councils. That's not the purpose. The purpose here is to cover better services for your residents, to deliver your new council as one voice, to make sure that your teams work together well over the next 25 years or 50 years when a new local government reorganisation will be put into place. But, we need to start thinking about the health of these teams and how we're going to deliver these services going forward. So a good service review does cover finance, but does not lead with the money. The money might be your senior objective, but when you're talking to your teams, your residents, your stakeholders, if you lead with the money, we're not going to get the quality of input that we want from people. So we do bring multiple perspectives. Now, some service reviews will require different levels of organisation here and engagement. So some service reviews, again, let's think about the bins, may well involve public consultation and engagement. What do you want? What works well? It's going to involve looking at your data, looking at your statistics. So in Michael's borough, do your tiny little bins that you get picked up weekly work, or do the bins that I get, which are bigger but get picked up less frequently, does that work? Let's look at recycling rates. Let's look at fly tipping rates and missed bin rates. So let's look at the kind of services service contracts we've got with our various providers. So there's a big data piece to look at there. But we also want to talk to other services within the council. The bins and collecting the bins affects environmental health. It can affect planning. It can affect, all of these transport and highways, etc. There are multiple perspectives to a good service review. A good service review thinks about who they need to talk to whilst they're going through this change, but also who they're serving at the end. A really good service review is transparent about the trade-offs, tensions, and future options. And I put that in here because within LGR, I'm trying to think of a better way to say it, but away from winners and losers. But when it comes to merging our services and delivering one service, where previously there were three or four, we need to get away from thinking about it as winners and losers, but we do need to think about it in terms of um, mediating common goals or coming together with a bit of give and take. Yeah, okay, Michael, you can keep your little bins, but then we're going to have this schedule. There's a bit of give and take. There's going to be best bits from everybody, bringing them together. But if we start seeing them as concessions that we're losing, again, the mentality of the service review is not going to be a good one. But we need to talk to our frontline workers, and we do need to be honest with our staff and with ourselves that there are going to be trade-offs here. However, what we want to do, a good service review, will build momentum for change. We've only got 45 minutes today, and we could probably talk about in one whole session or half day is how you get people on board with your change. But a really good service review, talking to the right people and asking the right questions, will build that momentum from your staff upwards. They're probably the biggest people, the people that you want to get involved here, but your staff will be able to tell you an awful lot. But it will then be honest and evidence-based and well-timed. Understanding service reviews and how change psychology works will help. It might sound a bit, oh, Rachel, we're just looking at the bins here. We're not. Let's get away from the simplicity of a service review and let's look at the complexity of it. Now, what does a bad service review look like? So I've sort of touched on a couple of these already, but a bad service review starts with the question, how do we save money? When you lead with the money, what you will get is bad decision making. Now we know that money needs to be saved. We know that we may well be delivering things on a tighter budget, and we know that money is important. I'm not for a second saying it isn't, but when we lead with the money, we don't necessarily make the right policy decisions. A bad service review won't take your lived experience into account. Now, when I say lived experience, I don't just mean your residents, I mean your staff as well. There will be somebody on your front line in your contact centre that's been doing this for 25 years and can tell you absolutely everything that's wrong with your bin service. Are you talking to that person? Are you talking to the crews that collect the bins or the planners that deliver, consultations? I'm sticking with the bins. Like I said, this is not a bin session, but we're sticking with this. Everybody knows this service. So, are you talking to the crew? Are you going around with the bin crew and looking at what they do? Are you talking to the residents? Are you talking to your complainers? Are you talking to people who've got genuine complaints that have gone to stage 3 or the ombudsman? Pick up the phone. These people have got things to tell you and they want to be heard. Are you talking to the right people? Um, a bad service review doesn't have any critical friends, and there's no dissenting views in a bad service review. A bad service review comes away saying we're doing everything absolutely brilliantly and we're not going to change a thing. We're going to pat ourselves on the back and go, oh, this is great. That's a bad service review. There is no such thing as a perfect service, particularly not in local government. And it's full of performance data, but no actual insight. Have as many graphs, charts, and tables as you need. But unless you're interpreting that data into a narrative and a story, it's a bad service review because it doesn't mean much unless you can translate it into something. And it treats services as silos, ignoring the interdependencies and knock on effects. The biggest link I can make with bins is customer services. When you change what you do with a very visible, high profile service, the knock on effect around not just environmental health, schools, bins, transport, so customer services, for example. So don't treat your services in silo. Recognize the interdependencies that our services have. That can be interdependencies in your data. Does your bins data use council tax data, for example? You're going to have to get more data from the other areas within your new council. Do you have different tipping off points? Do you have, how do your customers demand a bulky collection? So all of these things, this is huge change that we're talking about. And like I say, I'm just talking about the bins here. So have a think about those interdependencies because a bad service review will not consider those interdependencies. Michael, please make sure that I'm on time here because otherwise I'm going to end up waffling too much about the bins. Thank you. Now, in terms of how can we get sort of the bad away from the good? A good service review, or what we're trying to think about, and the hints and tips that we're talking about here, because we know we've got an awful lot of this coming up. And for anybody now who I've turned into a massive state of panic, I apologise, but also it might be the sort of the fire that we need to realise the extent of the work that, LGR is a bit of a nebulous concept right now. We've got people way all above our pay grades submitting things to central government and all these proposals and policies, and it feels abstract and nebulous at the moment. But when this kicks in, we've got a very short time frame to do an awful lot of work. And how do we do that? Some of the hints and tips I've got here are around bringing in critical friends. Now, this can be internal or external. One of the things that we don't want to do is create an echo chamber around our own services. So if all we get is planners talking to planners about other planners, we're not going to get any challenge. We're not going to get any assumptions or any stupid questions. We're not going to get somebody like me coming in as a consultant saying, "Well, why do you do that?" And then someone else being like, "Oh, right, well, why do you do that?" And then someone else, "Well, why do you do that?" And then all of a sudden, "I don't know" is the answer. So when we're in that loop, or that reinforcing loop of just talking to ourselves, we do not get clarity of perspective. We also don't get any distance. So, don't just speak to people who use the service, not the people who just deliver it, not the people who, are involved in planning it, but speak to other people, speak to other teams and departments, speak to your residents, speak to your stakeholder groups, and talk to each other critically, and start doing that now. As soon as you know the footprint for your new council, if you're going through LGR, the first thing everybody needs to do is say, right, I'm a waste manager. I'm going to get in touch with all the waste managers in my new footprint, and we're going to start with a plan. Now, for some areas, that might be absolutely all star-spangled rainbows. Brilliant. We're going to get along brilliantly. We're all going to do a great job. For others, there's a source of tension there already, and everybody might be worried about who's going to get that waste manager's job in the new council, who's going to be leading the teams, am I going to be made redundant as a part of this? So we've got all of these really personal fears coming into an area where we need to do quite a practical job. So sometimes bringing in external people, bringing in the likes of us, bringing in, consultants or critical friends, and that could be from another department, or it could be someone like Trim and Change, can help to give that distance and perspective, be from somebody who's not as emotionally invested in some of these changes. We want to look across systems. We've talked about this a little bit already, so I won't harp on about it, but how do the bins relate to health, housing, climate outcomes? These are really big strategic objectives, but this is a golden opportunity to reset how your systems work together. How do environmental services speak to social care? Sounds like they are two completely different ends of the spectrum, but they're not. When we look at dirty backyards, when we look at hoarding, when we look at cleanliness, when we look at, the sort of neighbourhood antisocial behaviour, we're looking at services across a real broad spectrum of the council here. And a good service review will recognise that. So look at that from the opposite point of view. What does social care know about, environmental health issues? How do we talk to each other? How are we communicating as a council? And before someone says data sharing and we can't share the data, that's a whole separate conversation. Like, we know the data's an issue. Now, we need to be honest in a good service review, or to where the power lies and who gets to make decisions. So this is again probably something for a whole other session, and perhaps we'll do a session on where the power lies in decisions around change and service reviews. But this is going to be something that I think is going to be quite key to getting through LGR service reviews in particular unscathed. And when we're in flux, so we've got some councils shutting down and new councils being created, but we've got county councils being split up and disaggregated over different footprints. The power and who's making decisions might be transitional. So we might have an interim team coming in and making a lot of decisions, or we might have interim ownership over a lot of decisions. So it could be, let's stick with the bins, and we've got our group of waste managers that have all come together. Let's pretend there's 5 of them, but one of them's been given the task of leading this group, and it might be from one council. Council number 2 might be leading on planning. Council number 3 might be leading on arts and culture. Perhaps let's pretend we're doing this. That's temporary power and temporary structure. But understanding who gets to make the decisions here is going to be really key to the kind of service review that you're doing, and it's going to be really key to the decisions that you make on behalf of your residents. And don't forget political power here. So the power structures and who's making decisions is in flux. So you'll have a shadow council that's established, and you'll have sort of that structure, but they'll be really, really concerned with lots of other things and perhaps not necessarily the bins. So, but we need decision makers here. We need that power. And lastly, a good one, we'll focus on improvement. We want to improve services. And this is an opportunity to improve our services. I think quite a number of people, particularly in middle and senior management, might be looking at LGR as a bit of a threat at the moment. But we need to, in order to do this well, think of this as an opportunity to improve our services. I don't think anybody, hand on heart, can say that their service is perfect. Well, perfection's not what we're aiming for. We are looking to improve these services. We're going to have bigger footprints. We're going to have better economies of scale through LGR, and may also have a bit of distance from our residents. So we need to deal with services differently. Before I close service reviews and go on to evaluations, which is a slightly different format of looking at things and evaluating things, I want to sort of have a pause there. Are there any major questions coming out of what I've said about service reviews so far? What are your views on this? Is there anything that you're worried about or concerned about around service reviews? Questions about the bins, post them somewhere else. This is as much as I've been talking about the bins. I can no longer answer your questions. Michael, I can't see anybody. So do we have any questions so far?
No, there's nothing in the chat.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. Okay. So, just a quick time check, great stuff. So let's move on to evaluations. Now, evaluations, I said earlier, sort of same family but different. Think cousins, not sisters. An evaluation might be part of a service review, which is why we've kind of put them together. So you might want to say, I want to evaluate what we've got now before going into a review. And a baseline is absolutely part of any service review. Evaluations, however, are slightly different. So a review quite often looks inward. What are we doing? How are we providing a service? What can we change? Whereas an evaluation more likely looks at impact. What was the impact of this project and this funding that we received? How did we deliver it and what were the outcomes? So evaluation is about whether something worked. Who did it work for and why did it work, so that we can repeat it and do the same thing again, or we can do something differently next time in order to achieve better outcomes. Evaluations do provide accountability and learning and legitimacy. And for quite a number of large grant funding schemes, like the UK SPF funding, like the community renewal funding that preceded that, like Plans for Neighbourhoods funding now, or like things like holiday activity and food and even HSF funding. Some of these come with the requirement for formal evaluation, but some of them come from internal drivers to say, we've put a load of money into this particular project and we want to know how it's gone. So it provides accountability. It's great for programs around discretionary schemes and innovation funds and that kind of stuff. And when it's done well, it can evolve a service in real time and not just after the fact. But I'm going to go on to that in a second. Now, why evaluate? And this picture's awful on here, but I put into my graphics package evaluation, and this is what I got, because this tells you everything about what some people think evaluation is. And it's extremely, jazzy graphics, but jazzy graphics they're brilliant, great, they look great, but unless they have a narrative behind them, they don't tell you anything. So why evaluate? And it's to know that we've made a difference, but not just that we delivered an activity. So the kind of evaluations that we do a lot around UK SPF funding, we do a lot around Plans for Neighbourhood stuff, community renewal funding. And we look at, it's great to say, well, 25 sessions with these members of the public were held, 44 showcases of this, that, and the other. We're just quantifying stuff. It's not just that we delivered the activity, it's the difference that we made. We want to improve services whilst they're running, not after they're finished. So when we're delivering these big programs, working with an evaluation partner throughout can help, because you then get iterative improvements. So if you're showing that you can say three key milestone points throughout your 2-year program, you've sat down and you've genuinely reflected and you might have iterated or done something a little bit differently or repeated something that's gone well, brilliant. A lot of evaluations are right at the end of, but a really good one will go through the scheme with you. They're important to funders. They really are important to funders. And sometimes we see them as a bit of a tick box exercise because they're important to funders. They're important to audit and they're important to public transparency expectations. But let's move away from that mentality. And Michael and I, we have worked with people who see this as a tick box exercise and their heart's not in it. But we've also worked with people who are like, we really want to deliver and make a change here. We really want to do something different. How are we going to demonstrate that after we've done this, we need more money to carry on? Because that's kind of often the biggest question. But so we want to build a case for scaling or sustaining a program. We've done an awful lot of work around food insecurity and food sustainability evaluations. And one of the things as evaluators we look at is how can we demonstrate that this is worth continuing to invest in? So evaluations give you not just the story of what you've done, but the difference and the impact that you made in order to convince funders to continue giving you money for this fantastic work. We also want to learn about what works and what doesn't, and with honesty and care. Some things don't work, and in local government and public services, we're a bit scared of the stuff that doesn't work, and we're a bit scared of saying, do you know what, we thought this would work, we tried it, we did our best, but it didn't exactly deliver what we wanted. So we're going to learn from it and do something differently next time. It's okay to fail. It's okay not to get the results that you want. It's okay to get a different outcome than what you expected to achieve. But if an evaluation and a good evaluation will understand how that happened, where it happened, why it happened, and it will help you to move on from that. Evaluations are scary things when we feel like someone's coming to mark our homework or we're in a vulnerable position because we're asking somebody, usually somebody external, to come and have a look at what we've done, that we've poured our heart and soul into the last 12 months, and they're not going to quite understand us and they're going to tell us we've done a terrible job. It's a really vulnerable position to be in, but a really good one will help you to fail well. Moving on, common evaluation issues. Just keep an eye on the time. We're good for time. So some common evaluation issues are designed too late to influence anything. So again, having done dozens of local authority evaluations, we see them in two strands. One, where at the beginning of a programme, the council will say, or the deliverers will say, we need an evaluation partner because we know we want to learn from this and demonstrate at the end that we've done a great job and we need more money to continue doing this. So we work with an evaluation partner right all the way through. So your evaluation partner, us, what we do is we help you to understand what metrics you might need to capture throughout the life of your program. We help you to understand the map, that theory of change. What inputs are you going to be inputting? What outputs are you going to be outputting? What are you aiming to achieve? We do this quite often through a workshop called What Will Be Different. So a good evaluator will help you understand at the beginning of your journey what will be different at the end of the journey. The second type of evaluation is when somebody is looking over their grant funding documentation with 8 weeks to go and they read the last section that goes, and do we need to formal evaluation? They go, oh no, quick, get us an evaluator. We've got 4 weeks to do all of this work that we should have been doing over the last 18 months. And we need a report yesterday. That's the second type of evaluation. They're both fine, no judgment, but they are two very different outcomes. So when you're working with an evaluation partner all the way through, you're building that narrative, you're building up your evidence base, you're building up the stories that you're telling, the case studies that you want to showcase, and the outcomes that you want to achieve. When you're doing it right at the end, there are challenges for evaluators because we need to then look back over the whole of a program that we don't know about at this page. We've come in right at the end and we're not quite sure everything that you've done. So we need to do a lot more digging in a much faster pace. We also get data that isn't necessarily collected with those outcomes in mind. So we quite often get we want to demonstrate that we've increased footfall in our town centre. Brilliant. Where was your baseline for footfall when you started? Haven't got one. How have you been collecting footfall going through? We haven't. But so then we need to pivot, right? Have sales gone up along this row? You know, what can we do to demonstrate that more footfall was happening in this particular part of your town centre if we're looking at economic regeneration? But working with an evaluation partner right from the beginning will tell you that you need to think about a way to capture footfall. It will think that you need to think about how you're going to demonstrate these outcomes. But when you're doing it at the end, it's tough, but it's not impossible. But have a think, and think about yourselves. Think to yourselves honestly when you've done them and commissioned them in the past. Have you gone it and done it right at the end, or have you worked with someone and thought about this back to front, if you will? You need to start at the end and think backwards for an evaluation. Common evaluation issues as well. Ignore demographic and equality or equity data when everyone's kind of treated as the average. Now, when it comes to data gathering and gathering demographic information, it's not necessarily all about collecting everybody's personal protected characteristics on a form every time you see everybody. That's not what sort of demographic information is necessarily. It's a bit of it, but it's not all of it. It's about understanding and using information that's available to you. So your own systems and your own council data and intelligence, national available data sets, you know, think things like indices of multiple deprivation, digital exclusion risk index, ONS, second language data or ONS mapping data, your sort of lower super output area data. Look at your council tax and benefit data, and you can map where your socioeconomically deprived wards are. You can look at different data. So when you're delivering grant programs, demographic data matters because we want to be able to say, not just for things like the public sector equality duty for the council, but we want to be able to say that we're hitting the target groups that we're aiming to support. We want to say that we've definitely reached the groups that we wanted to talk to. We want to say that we know that these groups exist in the first place. But common evaluation issues are when we come to evaluate something, we'll say, right, so can you tell us like which communities you've worked with? All of them. Okay, could you be a bit more specific? So how have you engaged with women? Right, well, we haven't. Okay, so this is the back to front nature of what we've been doing. So we then look to data to prove retrospectively what we've been doing. But have a think about demographic data when you're setting up your programs from an evaluation point of view and think about those communities you are serving. A common evaluation issue is also kind of poor methods. Now, weak surveys, bias samples, no baselines, these are the kind of things that we get delivered to us as evaluators. Go, we did a survey at the beginning and we look at the survey and the results and there's no demographic data. It doesn't ask, you know, open and closed questions. It's not particular, and it's just for the people that came into the library between those two dates. You know, we're talking about kind of being able to be broader about your things like surveys and data. We need to get big captured stuff, but small sort of quite sort of poor methodology can really impact an evaluation. And the last one I've put here is it produces a 40-page report that nobody reads or acts on. I mean, it breaks my heart because I do write these 40-page reports that then go and sit on a shelf and nobody looks at ever again. But a really good evaluation, not only is the report that, you know, ticks the box for the funder, it gives you the narrative, it gives you the case studies, it gives you the social media content to celebrate what you've done, but it gives you lessons that you will learn as a result of this evaluation. Very similar. Let's go right back to the beginning and think about service reviews. A good service review is not a document. A good service review is a new, better service. So, you know, a service review and a plan, and these are all our new values, these are all our new service standards, these are all our new data inputs. You know, there's a lot of admin and paperwork to be done around it, and there will be a report at some point. You'll need to present this new service. But a good service review leads to a better service. A good evaluation leads to better future delivery or lessons learned for delivery of programs and projects in the future, or the next time you do something with your community, you do it differently based on what you've learned. And a good evaluation can also cement those relationships that you've built with your partners, with your stakeholders, with your residents, with the community groups that you're working with. And that's something that you can share and celebrate together. And evaluation isn't marking your homework. There's a bit of that, when we do value for money assessments, then, there's a bit of calculation that goes on, and we can give you value for money, and we can look at demographics. And there are ways to score what we've done. But a really good evaluation gives you something to celebrate. It gives you the story that you've generated, and it gives you the impact that you've made. A poor evaluation is a 40-page report that never sees the light of day, or a boring cabinet report that you go, yes, we've done this, these are our metrics, next. We need to learn from these things, and a good evaluation will give us that. I think this might be my last slide. In terms of carrying on with good evaluations, what the actual evaluation, or I think service review as well, summing up what I've been talking about, a good evaluation starts early. It's right at the beginning. Right at the beginning of your project or your program, you have to think about evaluation. And you can, even if you're evaluating yourselves and you're not bringing other people in to do it, you need to think about, what questions are we needing to answer? What will be different? What impact will we be making? And what stories do we want to tell at the end of this? Not, right, everybody, this is all the activity and action we need to deliver, in the blind hope that it will answer all of these things that we said we were going to do. Evaluation needs thinking about at the beginning. A really good evaluation combines quant and qual. Sounds pretty obvious, do a bit of quant, do a bit of qual, but you'd be stunned at how many evaluations or sort of retros into big projects look at one or the other and not both. Separately, they are fantastic research methods and great evaluation methods, but they only really work genuinely well when they are combined together. And there are ways to combine your quant and your qual. So when you're asking for quantitative feedback from your residents, you then back that up by exploring the same themes. There are ways to merge these two, but you'd be stunned at how many people think a quick tick box or 6 interviews when we've spoken to 200,000 people, or it's quite stunning the way that some people get this a bit wrong. But anyway, it also embeds voices. There is inclusion. And this comes back to some of the demographic data that we're talking about, but it can be, I've put here sort of race, disability, and income, but these are the communities that we're serving, and we need to understand through an evaluation the kind of intersectionality of how these communities experience our services differently, and we need to embed their voice. We are no longer homogenous communities. We're just not. We're no longer just restricted to communities of place, but in terms of understanding the impact that our programs have had on different communities, we absolutely have to include that inclusive voice, because without it, we're homogenizing and putting everybody into an average bucket, and we're not learning. Moving on to learning, a good evaluation will prioritize learning, will not just accountability. So again, this is the impact that we've had alongside the quantitative outputs of what we've delivered. We've done 25 community sessions or community celebrations. That's brilliant. But the impact was stronger communities, or an improvement in the perceptions of the council, or there are now 6 more legacy groups, or we've trained and got 25 people some jobs, and therefore the economic impact. We need to see the impact, not just what we've delivered. And it ends with clear, actionable, prioritized recommendations linked to evidence. Now, no, yeah, this was my last slide. I was going to do one about recommendations, but I've run out of time anyway. But we can talk about recommendations another time, but clear, actionable recommendations. And even in the very, very best projects that Michael and I have evaluated, and there have been some stunners, not one of them gets away without some recommendations. There is no such thing as perfect project management. There's no such thing as perfect program management. There's no such thing as perfect projects. There are always learning opportunities, and a really good recommendation will celebrate and build on what you've done really well, and encourage you to do that good thing well again in the future. And it'll also recognise, that we had to pivot in certain areas, and that we recognise that with every day is a school day. So I'm going to close there because we're hitting 42 minutes now, but we do have sort of 3-4 minutes for any questions if anybody asks. But if they don't, thank you very much for listening. I hope you do get something out of this. This has been a whistle-stop tour of service reviews and evaluations. And really, if you want to have a wider conversation about your fears and phobias around service reviews in particular, give us a shout. Completely confidential chat with Michael or me, or anybody else in the Truman Change team. And it same goes for evaluations as well. Michael, I'll hand back over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rachel. Brilliant presentation. And thank you everyone for coming and joining us today. Perfect timing as well, Rachel. You couldn't have done that any better. Also, if you do have any subjects that you'd like us to discuss at a future Change Chat, please put them in the chat, because we're always looking at expanding our subject topics and expanding the Change Chats that we do. We also, as I've mentioned, because we've done these several times, more Change Chats are available on our website, where we have gone into a more deeper depth about the LGR, housing, change management, culture change, a wide variety of everything. And also, as Rachel said, just to reiterate, if anybody does want to have a conversation about anything regarding service reviews or evaluations, please feel free to do so. Getting some really nice messages in the chat, Rachel, everyone saying thank you, they really enjoyed it. So just want to say finally, thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your Friday.